instead of feeling just like, woe is me, a victim all the time, and like, my life is garbage, like, there's no hope for me, things started shifting, and I started seeing how I was carrying parts of who my dad was in me because he instilled that in me.
Welcome to Grief City. And remember, if this is your first visit, you are not alone.
Welcome to the Grief City podcast. I'm Nuella, and I'm so thankful to have you here today. This is the start of season 3. It's crazy to be saying that. I wrapped up season 2 in like October, November, and a lot of life has been happening since then. And if you follow along on TikTok or Instagram, you know a lot of life has been happening since then. Back in April, my mother-in-law got diagnosed with cancer. So since that time, my husband and I started caretaking for her. My husband's stepfather worked night shifts, so we would really take care of her during the afternoons. And if anything came up at night, like an ER visit, things like that, we would rush her to the hospital and just make sure she was cared for. And she was doing pretty well with her treatments. And then in October, my husband's stepfather had a really bad stroke. We thought we were going to lose him. So then our life transitioned into caretaking for 2 adults. Because right around that time, my mother-in-law's labs were starting to not look great. And it was looking like the cancer was growing after she had had her major surgery of removal of things in the summer. And so we took on caretaking for 2 as she was starting to decline more and more. And my stepfather-in-law, thank God, he survived, and but he's definitely, been impacted by that stroke physically and a lot with his speech. So both of them couldn't work anymore, and we just realized, okay, their finances are going to be very limited, and just with their physical limitations right now too, I think we need to move them into a house with us. So the week of Christmas, or the week before Christmas, we moved into this beautiful home. And it was so chaotic because then on Christmas Day, we hosted 24, 25 people, all family. And it was very stressful. My body was hurting so much and my mind was just so worn down. And I really wasn't getting to feel some of the grief that I feel during the holiday season about my dad, just because life required so much more of me. And I just didn't have time for it, unfortunately. But that's okay because I've processed a lot of my grief. It's just I know I'm a little bit tender during that time of year. But anyways, long story short, I'm so glad we did that. So glad. Because my mother-in-law and my stepfather-in-law, due to circumstances out of our control, ended up having to move in with my brother-in-law. And we had to say goodbye. They now live much further away. And that is its own kind of ache when you've been caregiving for someone since day one. I took her to her first chemotherapy appointment and sat by her side. It's its own kind of ache when you're There's nothing more I can do. I have to now just let you go. And just as of yesterday, this episode will air, of course, several weeks later. But just as of yesterday, she has now officially been put into hospice home care. And it's like a really big gut punch from having, being told this was curative at the start to now, not even a year later. So we have been going through a lot of grief, my husband and I. And it was really good that I ended the season when I did, because it would have just been too much to try to be making new episodes and starting up a new season. And it was a lot. But I'm really thankful to begin season 3 right now. There's a lot that's been on my mind, a lot of topics I want to touch on, and people I want to bring on and interview as well. So if you are here today, thank you. It's a privilege to get to share with you and to get to hear your stories and to get reminded that while we can't carry one another's grief, we're really not alone in our grief. And while you may not understand the nuances in the grief that I've experienced, and I may not understand all the nuances in the grief you've experienced, we truly aren't alone at all. So this podcast, I share a lot about navigating grief and life after loss and just the different experiences that come up. But I think it's also equally important when we talk about grief and talk about navigating it, that we also talk about what it is that our loved one has taught us, how they've shaped us and molded us, how they have been just such an instrumental part in our lives and who they are to us. So in today's episode, I want to talk about what my father taught me. I started this podcast because I felt kind of crazy in my grief. And I will say that that very first season was a little bit more of me kind of processing as I went along. Lots of tears. Not that, I still have tears, of course, in these seasons. But that first episode, I was learning a lot about my grief and learning how to carry it better. And so it's been really cool to see over the past several months, just sharing clips online and putting out those episodes. It is so cool to see this little community that's beginning to blossom. My only hope when I started this podcast was that I would be able to share and be the friend that I wish I had in my early days of loss, that first year of loss especially, because I felt really alone. I had my husband, but he didn't, and he was amazing. He's been so supportive to me in this journey, but he didn't understand firsthand, all of these crazy feelings and thoughts and experiences that come up when you lose a loved one, especially as a daughter that loses a father. So that's always been my hope. And I always want to provide just support to you. And I hope when you listen to this podcast that you feel seen, you feel a little more understood, and you feel supported. I think talking about how someone has shaped us, how specifically our loved one that's no longer here has shaped us and been so instrumental in our lives is so vital, because as time has gone on, I've seen how different traits that my dad had and traits that he instilled in me have really been things that support me through my loss and through, going through all of these big emotions that I've experienced after losing him. So I'm excited today to talk about the things he's taught me, how I carry him, and this is always, at its core, this podcast has always been about just honoring him. My dad, what a guy. I think every daughter should be able to say that about their dad. Just what an amazing person. What a support system in my life. What an incredible teacher. Every morning at like 6 a.m., he would get up. He never missed his wake up. It was so impressive because I struggle daily with like consistently getting up at the exact same time. But every morning he would wake up, he would walk down the hallway in my parents' house, and he was just so cheery and happy and positive, and he was so chatty. And like my mom could not stand that in the mornings because she's like the type that's like, don't talk to me until I've had my coffee in the morning. I would say I'm a morning person, but I am not that level of a morning person. I am also the kind that's like, I enjoy the mornings, but please don't like berate me with conversation. Like, I'm not super happy and positive first thing when I wake up. I prefer to have some caffeine, some water, wake up a little bit more. So my dad was just so perky in the mornings and happy, and he loved like digging at that in my mom and I, like how we despised being so like cheery, or I should say we despised being talked at so much in the mornings. So he loved like leaning into that and just talking our ears off. It gave him so much joy to poke at us in that way. But he cracked me up with how cheery he was in the mornings, and he'd be trying to make jokes and everything. And then my dad, like after he had his coffee, after he watched a little news or sports, I can't remember what he even watched in the mornings. Immediately after that, he would head downstairs to the basement where his office was, and he would read his Bible and pray for like 30 minutes, an hour. I can't remember how long, but every single day he did that. He never, ever missed it. Ever. It was so cool how like the things he was passionate about, he was so dedicated to always. And I think that's something that's so cool about my dad is that he always modeled discipline in his life and consistency. I think consistency is like such a good way to describe him. He was always up in the morning, reading his Bible, always stuck to his routine because he believed it was so important. And I think that's something that I really admired and carry with me. While I'm not as good at my wake up routine, there are so many things in my life that I'm very passionate about that I've always remained like very dedicated to. And that's something he really modeled to my brothers and I. And I saw how when he put his faith at the forefront in his life like that each day, I saw how it really carried him through so many moments. He was such a steady person, just so consistent and like a steady peace in the family. You know, back in, I think it was 2008, the financial housing crisis hit. And my dad at that point had recently moved into full-time ministry. So that meant that like his paycheck was dependent upon donations people made to the ministry that he was the president of. So when the economy gets rough, people usually don't give as much because they're just not able to, or they're fearful that they're going to lose everything. So donations into the ministry really dwindled at that time. And of course, like, he was so passionate about how he was helping kids and teens through Christian Sports International. So things that needed financial backing for that and for programs that they did, that got the money first. So his paycheck was like the last thing to get funded. And there were several months where he wasn't getting paid at all. And all of the financial provision and responsibility was falling on my mom and her work. And it was so interesting how he always had this knowing that things were going to be okay. Like, my parents almost lost their house. We could barely afford anything but the very, very minimum. Sometimes even that was really hard. But he was always so steady in his faith, and he felt like God would provide. I think hard times always bring out the character in a person, and I've definitely seen that time and time again when I was growing up in my dad. And it's something I really admire. My dad's faith, of course, was an integral part of his life. It was like the center of everything. God was the center of everything to him, and everything revolved around that. A lot of times, if you talk to someone who was the child of like a pastor or the child of someone in like full-time ministry in some capacity, you don't always hear these stories. You usually hear a lot of like church hurt stories or that religion was really forced on them as a child, or like, oh, my parent was such a phony. They, in public, they praised God, acted like a good person, and in private, like, no, they were not that at all. And that's not everyone's story, but that's kind of, I feel like, the common thing you always hear. But I can say 1000% that who my dad was in public, whether he was speaking, whether he was just running a basketball camp for kids in the city of Pittsburgh, wherever he was doing ministry, he was that person in private. Now, we were forced to go to church on Sundays. That was a non-negotiable in our family. And he didn't force me into like youth group, but he highly recommended it. And because his faith was so authentic to him and he actually walked it out, there was nothing phony about it to him. It was very real. I never grew up feeling like religion was forced on me. And I'm so thankful for that. Because my faith, while it has been a wrestle for me after I lost him, it has also been the thing that has sustained me and brought me hope again. And it's brought me healing in my life. And I'm so thankful that he was just his authentic self, always. Now, of course, my dad was not a perfect man. He had his flaws and his shortcomings. Something that was kind of tough in our home was we didn't really communicate emotions much. We didn't address that kind of stuff too much. I love my mom, but my mom has carried a lot of anger, a lot of bitterness all her life. And that was most certainly felt by us kids. And that was, no doubt in my mind, very felt by my dad. I don't know where I got, I don't think everything is just caught by your parents. Of course, there's traits that you just take on because that's what you see your whole life. And somehow I did not continue carrying on the no communication thing. I don't know where it came from. It's just something I worked on. Um, but I think it's very, very important to communicate emotions. And that's very clear because I literally have a podcast about grief and loss. I am an open book about my emotions with a lot of things in life. But my parents did not do that. They did not communicate emotions well. And with the anger and the bitterness my mom carried, I know a lot rested on my dad's shoulders with that. And I think he really took the brunt of a lot of that. I didn't understand, like when we were going through that housing crisis time in 2008, I didn't understand why my dad didn't find other work. I think that was a hard one for me to swallow because I saw the pressure that it put on my mom because she was already working full time in HR and then she took on another part-time job in the evenings. And I see how that developed more anger and resentment in her. And I didn't understand why he did that. While I appreciate his knowing that things are going to be okay and his faith through that, I didn't agree with how he went about doing that because my mom was really stretched thin. And some other things I didn't understand. So my dad was just so forgiving, such a forgiving man. And it's a blessing and it's a curse, right? He had worked in ministry with some different people that were just interesting birds. Kind of deceiving, not the most honest all the time, not really looking out for the best interest of anyone else but themselves. And I feel like my dad got walked all over a lot. I really do. People promising once this is funded, we're getting millions of dollars that we're gonna donate into the ministry so we can really see the ministry expand and help more kids. Never happened. He got strung along for years with that, always believing that was gonna happen. It was like if someone wronged him, they could have wronged him so many times and he would just keep forgiving, which you should. You should forgive. But I think the part that I didn't agree with is that you keep forgiving, and then you keep forgetting. And you don't make boundaries with that person. I never understood that. And even so we have family members that are very loud about their political beliefs. So holidays were always fascinating. Sometimes they were peaceful. But holiday family gatherings, I remember this one year, my one family member was yelling at my mom because they disagreed about something politically. And she was yelling at her. And my dad just sat there and didn't stand up for my mom, didn't cut in, didn't set that family member straight a little bit. And I didn't get it because I'm stand up for your wife. Don't be so passive about that. What the heck? But I think looking back now on all those things that I didn't get and didn't really agree with, I look back sometimes and I'm Well, maybe he didn't get involved in that political conversation because it would have never been worth it. It would have never gone anywhere. There was no changing of minds. And that family member is going to always do what that family member does. And maybe he kept forgiving and forgetting with these ministry, like business partners, because he just always believed the best. And he always believed that that's what God would have wanted him to do, is to believe the best in people, to take people at their word. And I even think, like, with the financial crisis we went through and my mom working so much, like, maybe he just felt like his role was to stay steady and keep being like that one in the family that's like, it's hard, but it's going to be okay. God always shows up and he's faithful to us. I don't know. While I don't fully agree with all those choices he made, like, there's a respect and admiration I have for him to be someone who could endlessly forgive, to be someone who, like, spoke only when it was necessary or he felt it would actually have meaning, or like to be someone who can stand in the fire and just be like, it's okay, we're going to be fine. Like, keep seeing the light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. After my dad passed away, I think I started realizing a lot of these character traits much more, and seeing him for the flaws, but also like the strengths, and how, wow, like some of these strengths could also be a curse and hurtful at times. Like, they were also a blessing to him and to others. I realized, like, I called my mom a lot more than I ever called him. And I regret that because I wish I would have talked to him even more, and I would have asked him more questions about himself and asked him more questions about his perspectives on life and different things like that. I think a big thing that has really hit me in the last several years was, I didn't realize when my dad was living how much he protected my brothers and I. And honestly, like, especially me, because I was the little princess. But I see it now, just how much he fought to protect us. Especially from the brunt of, like, my mom's anger. And I've been very cautious to talk about that because I love my mom. My mom and I have had very honest conversations about this stuff. She knows how I feel. And I want to honor her because she just had a very rough upbringing, very abusive parents, and really was at a disadvantage in a lot of ways. But she carries a lot of bitterness, and I see how my dad protected us from a lot of that. Like, even so my mom got her fallopian tubes tied, and then 2 years later is when she was pregnant with me. So I was like truly a surprise baby. uh, and I think my mom has held some bitterness from that. You know, I've heard the little jabs here and there that are meant to be jokes, but I always think there's at least a layer of some truth in those. But my dad always made it known how wanted I was. Always. And I'm really thankful for that. I'm really thankful that he carried a lot. And I think he carried a lot silently. I would love to say that some of the challenges he faced, whether it be with my mom or others in his life that wronged him, didn't affect him, but I'm sure it did. And he never complained about it. He never led on to that. Like, you would have never known. Because he always tried to stay very positive. He always tried to talk highly of people. And he always kind of was just the guy, like, I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to do my task that's in front of me. Right before we lost him, I was not in the healthiest place mentally, emotionally. My husband and I had moved to Nashville probably like 6 months prior. And my husband, I think he had just got a new job at that point, but we didn't have like any financial stability. I was teaching some voice lessons and like that helped. But I had just gotten let go from a remote position that I had. And I mean, months prior, of course, like my husband was just completely unemployed because his company had to do layoffs with the pandemic. And we were struggling. We were like door dashing at night for like 4 or 5 hours just to make ends meet. And we were struggling to meet people, to feel at home and like planted. It was a not so great season of life. I was very worn down emotionally. Like every little thing just like felt like just so overwhelming. And I think just everything going on with the pandemic as well, just, oh my goodness, it just left you feeling very emotionally fatigued. There's so much going on. And then we lost him. Already being in like this disadvantage of like not emotionally healthy, being at this disadvantage, I should say. And then now losing him. It was a lot. I didn't know it at the time, but now looking back on it, when you're a daughter who loses their father, it feels like your security is just ripped out of your life. I felt so insecure. I felt so afraid. Felt alone, like no one could understand. My dad was a protector to me, and I honestly didn't process that aspect of father loss until like 2 years ago. I couldn't put words to it, but I just felt like my protection was gone. I felt very unsafe. Like, how do you find that confidence again in your life when that person who was always the one boosting it in you and was protecting you and protecting it in you just is gone? I honestly, like, once he was gone, I just felt like this child again. And I just wanted to, like, run to him. Felt like a little girl, and I just wanted to run to him and be wrapped in his arms and just know it was going to be okay. I think that's one of the heaviest aspects of father loss as a daughter. Because when you have a good father, they protect you always. And my husband protects me too, but it's different with a dad. It's just a different dynamic. It's a different relationship. And that's one of like the heaviest, I think, complex things to navigate after you lose your dad as a daughter. Just feeling this lack of protection. He always made me feel so safe. And after he was gone too, there was just so much confusion and like haze and just this overwhelm of like people's opinions about how he died. Like everyone had an opinion. Everyone said he should have done that or he should have done this, or like COVID wasn't real or it was killing everyone, or he should have gotten vaccinated, he shouldn't have, and just so much judgment. And I just wanted to like scream and be like, oh my gosh, shut up for a minute. My heart is breaking. I don't care about your opinions anymore. I just want someone to sit with me. I just want my dad back. It was really heavy just navigating all the political, like, back and forth with it all. Everybody was arguing. It was just like full-on tribalism on all sides. And those of us that were sitting with the grief of losing someone to COVID complications or COVID itself, we were just sitting there and it just felt like so much noise. And it felt like there was just no willingness of people to just sit with you. So I felt unsafe. I felt so alone. I felt so judged by the things that they'd say in the news about people like my dad, or family members would say about him, or say about us, my family, like my immediate family. It was so overwhelming. And it started to like bubble up all this anger inside of me. I was getting very, very bitter. Not only to complete strangers all around, but also just feeling so much bitterness and anger towards myself with all of the guilt I carried, anger towards God, anger towards family members. I just had a lot of anger. And as time went on, I started realizing like that sorrow and that anger, it needs a place to go. It was eating me alive every day. It was draining me every single day. I hated myself. I had no motivation to do much of anything. I still showed up and did stuff, but I felt like this zombie. I felt like a shell of myself. So I started realizing like, okay, I can't like fix this. So I started processing it through songwriting, which has always been my go-to to process most of the time. And it was really helpful. wasn't taking it away, but all of those big complex emotions needed to get expressed somehow, somewhere. They couldn't stay inside. It's really interesting. There was like a study done on like brain scans or like monitoring brain wave and activity. And so apparently, someone that's grieving, the brain activity looks like motivation. And I always think that's funny because so many grievers are like, I have no motivation, none at all. And I don't really think it was necessarily the thing if I had no motivation, because I was very motivated to feel very sad and like want to just not do anything and just think about my dad. I was very motivated to do that. But as I started to realize like this isn't like a problem I have, this isn't something that's just going to go away, I started trying to pull on that motivation to be utilized in healthier ways and not just toxic ways that always made me feel terrible. And there's nothing wrong with sitting with it and really processing it. But I wanted to process it in ways that would hopefully help me start to find some peace and healing. So songwriting was a very big outlet for me. And I think like that is when I realized, okay, I'm still here. This isn't killing me, even though it felt like it was. Especially with all of the grief, or I should say, all of the guilt I was processing. And I think the biggest shift for me, though, like I'll say this, something that was really good for me was I was like, I'm so tired of all of the outside noise, whether it's people's opinions about COVID, my dad, whether it's like people's thoughts on grief and things like that. Like, I was just so fed up with noise. And it was very helpful for me to get off of my social media accounts for a while. It really helped to get rid of like that distraction. And then it forced me to sit with my emotions because my only outlet was songwriting. And then I would take my dog on walks, and my husband and I would do things with each other sometimes. Like we'd go maybe get dinner, or we'd go on a walk, or we'd get coffee. But my life was pretty simple at that time, and I didn't have like lots of calendar engagements or events to go to. So I turned off social media for a while, and my calendar was pretty quiet, and it was really helpful because I had to start processing. I had to sit with all of the grief, all of the mess, all of the emotions. Ugh, it didn't feel good. But I'm so thankful that I did. Because then I came to the point of like 8 months into it, and a shift started happening for me when I realized like maybe I shouldn't make myself feel so guilty all the time. Maybe I need to find forgiveness for myself, for others, forgiveness toward God, toward my family. Maybe I need to let go of bitterness. It had like the grief hasn't taken me out, but the bitterness was dragging me down every single day. And the grief is heavy, but the bitterness. Oh. So I think things really started shifting for me when I realized like I need to find some forgiveness in my life. and I need to let some of this anger go. And when I look back on that time of like sitting with my heavy emotions every day and trying to figure out this whole anger thing I was carrying and the guilt and all that, I see how my father's like quiet steadiness was something that I was modeling in that time too. And it was something that I carried and still carry. Just that mentality of like, okay, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to cancel out all of this noise. I know what needs to be done, essentially. Like, I know the task that's at hand right now, and I have to do it. It hurt like hell to sit with my grief. And some days it felt like I took a ton of steps back. I was at square one again. And I didn't know if I was ever going to feel any relief. But I think that quiet steadiness of my dad, just that diligence and that consistency. Looking back, I see how that was something I carried through that time. Because I just kept sitting with the grief every day, and I just kept trying to hold out just a little bit of hope that maybe this would not be so bad one day. And I was right. There was hope again that started to come into my heart. There was peace again. And I'm not going to sit here and act like it wasn't a fight to try to get to that point. It was really hard. It was really hard. But better days did start to come. And especially when I started to forgive myself and I felt like I heard God answer that why? Why, God? Why did he die? Like, those were pivotal moments for me in this grief journey. And instead of feeling just like, woe is me, a victim all the time, and like, my life is garbage, like, there's no hope for me, things started shifting, and I started seeing how I was carrying parts of who my dad was in me because he instilled that in me. He instilled resilience in me. He modeled all of his life to me, what it means to show up, even when it's really hard. And how consistency in your life how it can carry you through the hardest times. And how creating, even when it really hurts, is so vital for our hearts. Creating and showing up and doing things that we know are going to be good for us. Like, he taught me that. And I think that's his legacy through me. I used to think that carrying someone's legacy was like meeting these metrics or doing certain things or like achieving certain goals. And I think that's part of it. But ultimately, I think carrying someone's legacy is just carrying parts of who they are through you. I see my dad's like traits reflected in my own life so much. I'm not him exactly. I definitely put some boundaries in place with people that wrong me. But even just like, even down to like forgiving people, he always forgave. And that lesson he taught me was so important, because I don't think I would be where I am now without having forgiven people, having forgiving myself, especially. I wouldn't feel the peace that I feel now if he hadn't modeled that for me as a child. But I just see how I carry him in so many ways in my life. And even with this podcast, like, my dad was such a helper. He was such a good friend to people. I want to be like that. I can't say I'm like that fully. Maybe one day I'll get there. But even just in doing this podcast, like, it feels like carrying his legacy to me. Because it feels like a way to come beside someone in the darkest season of their life. And to get to sit here and be like, hey, I can't carry your grief for you, but I just want to let you know that you're not alone. You're not crazy right now. All of these feelings you're going through they're normal. And this is really freaking hard, to lose someone you love so much. And I just see how, like, that kinship my dad had with so many people, like, I see how he has instilled that in me. And that's something that when you listen to this podcast or we talk to one another on social media, like, I hope you can feel, because that's all him. That's a lesson he taught me. And I hope you feel so loved and held and supported. Because grief is such a heavy burden to bear all on our own. I think we carry our loved ones forward in our life through who we are, through traditions that we do, through choices that we make. They're always with us. I'm still discovering things about, like, how I'm carrying him. I'm still discovering that. I think I'll keep discovering that. I really feel like when I become a parent one day, like, I'm gonna notice a lot of things that I never noticed before, and feel him close in so many new ways. But it's kind of just ever unfolding how I carry my dad. And sometimes it makes me smile. Sometimes it makes me cry. Sometimes it makes me do both. But it is like my greatest honor and such a privilege to be able to carry him in my life and to be able to continue being like who he was in the world. I'm not going to be him exactly, because I am my own person. but I can see so many traits of him in myself, and it is just my greatest honor, truly. And I know my dad would be so proud of that in me. When a loved one dies, especially a parent, I think us children that are left are always like, I just want to make him proud, or like he died before I could really make him proud, and like do all these things in my life. But I think the truth is that they were always proud. My dad was always proud of me. It didn't matter what more I achieved or did. He was just proud because he loved who I was. He was proud because I was his. I was his daughter, and that made him so proud. And I feel that every day. I just feel that, like, how happy he is with me. And I'm sure he's very happy that I made a whole podcast because of him. I think what's so important for us to remember is that the love they gave us doesn't disappear. And I know, like, the phrase, like, grief is only love with no place to go. But I think how we move through the world, how we love others, I think those are those places for that love to go. I know we can't physically, like, have them in front of us anymore and give them that love. And it's different. But I think we always carry them. And as messy and difficult and hard it is to navigate loss some days, I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of it. And one of the best gifts is that we get to carry them and we get to feel them close in that way. So I know they're not physically here, but parts of who they are live on inside of you. And I think grief really reveals how much of who they are lives through us and how much of them we carry with us through our day-to-day life. Welcome to Season 3 of the Grief City podcast. This season is all about learning to carry it. We'll talk soon.